Farm4Profit Podcast. Take a listen, have a blast. Farm4Profit Podcast. Learn about farming while having a laugh. Farm4Profit Podcast.
And listeners, welcome back to the Farm4Profit Podcast. You got Tanner here.
Dave's here.
And Corey.
Yes. Good job, boys. Way to go. What a fun Farm for Fun episode we have planned for today.
Mm-hmm.
That's
show.
it, really? You guys are knocking this out of the
I'm
park.
speechless because we just watched Johnson and Spieth come through and got to see them both birdie hole number 2 here. Just put a picture out on Twitter and Instagram. Called it, it was Spieth putting. I called it, what did I call it?
Spieth, beef, and
birdies.
Yeah. He's got cows in the background across the river.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
It's a pretty picturesque hole.
Yep.
And we're still hanging out here in
What do you call this?
it's almost like a man cave, but it's like head of operations.
In Andrew's office.
This is the bunker.
Cardiac Hill is what they called it.
That's right.
Cardiac Hill.
Right at the
That
base
is
of
what
Cardiac Hill. And I'm excited for this interview because I think that Neil and I have been exchanging emails for about 2 years to get a conversation put together because we're going to pick his brain and learn a lot and have a lot of fun while we do it. But before we let him talk,
Yeah, you already said the name.
why
Thanks.
don't you introduce him the right way?
Thanks for the introduction.
Yeah, bleep that
Bleep,
name
bleep,
there.
bleep.
So, all right.
I
With
can't
no
take-
music.
Can't take your job.
Just want you guys to recognize the
There is
talent.
music. The listeners aren't going to know the difference except for you calling it out.
All right. Here we go. Today on the Farm for Fun show from the 2024 John Deere Classic, we meet up with a man that might have one of the coolest jobs in the world, maybe besides CTO. If you're into history, that is. This man is a husband, a father, #1 selling author, an archivist, writer, and speaker. You can find his work in books like Tractor Wars, The John Deere Story, and Lincoln's Wrath. What a resume this guy has, especially when you're a historian and archivist for one of the best ag companies in the world, probably one of the best companies in the world. Please welcome from East Moline, Illinois, Mr. Neil Dahlstrom. What is up?
I feel like I should be done now. Like, it doesn't get any better.
Thank
than
you.
that.
All right.
That's
Yep.
awesome.
And we're done.
Yes, and we're done.
We have so much to learn from you. I truly think you have one of the coolest jobs.
I mean, that's all we've done today is interview people who have the coolest jobs.
Yeah.
We started off with Andrew. We talked to Rex.
Yeah, but this one's real.
This is a real job.
This is the real
No, that's
job.
just what we get to do. We get to interview cool people that have cool jobs.
Yeah.
So welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited we can finally make this happen.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's wind it back though. Before we get into your current job, let's go back to little Neil.
Yeah.
You grew up here, raised here.
I grew up here. I'm from East Moline. Went to United Township High School right up the street and went to college, and I'm super smart. And I said, nothing historically important ever happened in the Quad Cities, so I'm going to move away, which I did.
Okay.
And moved out to the East Coast for a couple of years, was working in history and archives, and found out there was a job opening in the John Deere archives, which I did not know existed.
Oh, so you grew up here and didn't know that was a thing.
Nope. And ended up at John Deere. The archives is about a mile from the house I grew up in.
And you didn't know it was there?
And didn't know it was there. There's a building with John Deere sign in front of it, and that was it.
There's a couple of those
And
around
yeah, and I played. So when I was growing up, directly across the street from the archives was a soccer field. So I used to play soccer
Okay.
there as a kid. So I was literally like 50 feet away from the archives and didn't know it existed, and had to move from Virginia to find out.
That's where you were, was Virginia.
Yeah,
How long were you out there?
I was there 2 years, Alexandria.
Okay. And that was just kind of after college.
It was it was after grad school. So I went to Monmouth College here in Central Illinois, then got a master's in historical administration from Eastern Illinois University. So studying archives and museums and historic sites, and I had an assistantship with the Illinois State Archives. And what I learned was I like to go through other people's things. And I prefer that they had been dead for a really long time, and I like to go through their stuff. But really fell in love with manuscripts and documents and just kind of piecing things together.
When did you learn that was what you wanted to do, was history?
I actually started volunteering at museums when I was in high school. I think my junior year of high school, I did some Civil War reenacting. I had a teacher give me the Killer Angels by Michael Shera, which is a book about Gettysburg,
Okay.
and read it in a couple days and fell in love with it. And things that probably would never happen today. When I was a junior in high school, I joined a local Civil War reenacting group, And the first reenactment was in Tennessee. And my parents essentially let me go with a group of strangers to Tennessee to be in a reenactment on a 100-acre property with 5,000 reenactors.
Wow.
So I got to do that. I'd guard duty at like 2 a.m., entirely authentic. And
whenever I've seen these, I've never been to one. Whenever I see clips from one, like everybody's whole hog into this.
Oh, yeah. And in this one especially.
It's real. It's all night, all day.
Yeah. It's intense. I was late.
But you already know how it ends.
Well, yeah, and I was a newbie, so my job in the battle is to die first. So you literally,
I was going to ask.
You take a shot and then lay on the ground for an hour with one eye closed, watching what's going on, and you just lay there dead for an hour.
Oh,
so
man.
that was my introduction.
Did you get a shot off at least?
I don't think I got a shot off. No, I did march in a dress parade with thousands of reenactors, and I'd never actually held a Civil War rifle before. And they gave the command to remove bayonets, and I didn't know how to do it. So it was my bayonet and 5,000 other rifles without bayonets, and someone like grabbed me from behind and pulled it off for me and handed it to me. And so you just kind of learn a lot from screwing up constantly.
So it's like whole like choreography going.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
Huh. It's like controlled chaos. It kind of sounds like 5,000 people.
Yeah. There was a barn burning in the middle of the night. I mean, it was a lot.
So they probably like built a barn to burn it down?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's intense.
Yeah.
That's intense. That's
cool.
cool.
God, that is so cool.
Tanner is a very big history buff as well. As one of his favorite podcasts is a history podcast.
All right, most of the podcasts I listen to outside of agriculture are history. It's not like I have a true era, but World War II is probably what I'm most versed in. It's fun for me. I hated reading. I still don't like reading. Hence why we have a podcast and not a newspaper. But for me, it was a way to consume something that I enjoyed and learning from the past. For the first time, I was on a vacation and I read a World War II book in like 3 days. And I had never read a book from start to finish. I was like, oh, I actually enjoy this. And just kind of spawned out of that. I've never been to a reenactment or anything like that.
Well, the downside of going to a big one like that is the next one was local, and the interstate was right next to us, and we were in a park. And so you go from like complete authenticity to that, and I was like, I think I'm out. I don't know that I can do this way anymore.
But I still find it interesting at such a young age, you even got the degree in being an archivist. I assume that's something that people evolve into as they grow older, but you knew from a young age.
Yeah, I knew from a young age. When I was an undergrad, one of my professors got me a job in the college archives, which didn't really exist. It was a big room with a bunch of stuff that had been collected. So that was kind of my first taste of it. And I just really like to organize things, other than my garage, which is awful. But like the combination of the organization and description and now digitization and all the things that go into archives, a lot of the job is making sure other people can find things. So that's part of it as well. But of course, when you're digging into records all the time, you just start to kind of piece things together. And I just kind of like the mystery and the discovery of it.
And Corey, you said you're an author?
Yes.
And so tell us about that. How did you decide to write a book on the archives?
So my first 2 books came out in 2005. The first one was kind of accidental because my boss in Virginia had been doing this Civil War research for years and years and asked me if I wanted to write a book, and I was incredibly naive and thought that sounded really fun and easy, which it turned out it wasn't. And then that archive went bankrupt. I joined Deere and decided, maybe I should look into this John Deere guy and like learn something about him. So then that became a biography of John and Charles Deere, which was just a really interesting experience. So those both came out in 2005. And then the most recent one is a book called Tractor Wars that came out in 2022. And it was kind of born out of the 100th anniversary of the John Deere tractor we celebrated in 2018. Mm-hmm. So you start kind of doing research, putting together talking points and making sure we've got everything right and that we know what we think we know. Well, then you find these little stories and letters and things, and you start to kind of put things aside. And a couple things that always bugged me through my career, people would say to me, well, why was John Deere late getting into the tractor business? And I'd always say, well, 1918 felt really, really early to me. And so I don't understand the question. And I also don't know the answer, so I can't really answer the question. And then I was often asked what was the first John Deere tractor. So I took those 2 questions and turned it into like a 200-page book. And I think I kind of know the answers now. I'm not entirely sure.
So do we have to buy the book to get the answers, or are you gonna?
Well, I can give you the answers. I'll give it away. So the first John Deere tractor depends on your definition of the word first. So I think I got 5 candidates. If it's the first tractor with a John Deere name on it, it was a tractor built in 1912 by an engineer named Charles Melvin. He built one, and then it was probably scrapped. The first, what was intended to be the first production John Deere tractor, we know it as the all-wheel drive. There were probably 90 built between 1918 and 1919. But before the first one was finished, Deere bought the Waterloo Gasoline Engine Company. So that was March of 1918.
Okay.
So that was the first tractor sold, but it did not have the John Deere name on it.
So Waterloo Boy? Is that what?
It was the Waterloo Boy. And so the Leaping Deer was put on it in 1920, I think.
Terraplex Ag is your one-stop shop for agricultural drones. Visit www.terraplexag.com to explore their range of drones, support equipment, and technology that provides you the accuracy and efficiency you need. Their experts have training and support services to help you use your equipment safely and effectively. Or you could have them custom apply your chemicals themselves. Unlock the agility that you need to accelerate profitability on your farm with Terraplex Ag, delivering cutting-edge solutions for yield maximizing results. Visit www.terraplexag.com.
And there were some other experimental models built along the way. So it depends. It depends on what you want it to be. And everyone wants it to be something different.
Yeah, exactly.
So do you know why? You talked about leaping deer. I'm looking at a picture of deer right here on the door, and it looks like a whitetail, Midwestern whitetail. But every time I see a deer in a statue, like at the headquarters, it looks like more of an elk or a fallow deer. Do you know why they use a different deer?
So I don't know why they use different deer specifically. There was a story for a long time that the original leaping deer trademark from 1876 was based on an African deer. Well, I asked our folks in South Africa if that was true, and they said, no, that's not a real thing. So wherever that story came from, we don't know. The statues that are in front of headquarters in a number of our facilities were actually purchased at the World's Fair in Chicago in 1893.
Huh.
So they were not...
Oh, they weren't custom.
They weren't custom. A year ago, we didn't think they were made for deer. We found some evidence recently that maybe they were made specifically for deer, but we can't really prove it yet. They were designed by an artist named Henry Mullins, who actually built a statue on top of the first Madison Square Garden. But essentially, those statues, I think we have 14 of them in our collection today. We don't know how many were originally purchased, but they used to be on the rooftops of all of our sales branches.
Huh.
And they're made of a steel skeleton, and the outside is a real thin copper. So it's the same technique used to make the Statue of Liberty. Huh. And the antlers have actually been changed out over the years. So you would have like Charles Deere Wyman, our CEO in the 40s and 50s, says, well, we want it to look more like the trademark, so let's swap the antlers out. And then someone would come along and go, actually, no, let's put the original antlers back on.
See, he laughed at me. There's way more to the story than there is here.
So we actually have 2 pallets of antlers in the archives.
Awesome.
2 pallets.
So what's it take to get a set of those in our studio?
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Everybody would be like, what are those? Those are the original.
Well,
John
you
Deere.
understand that they're the statues out
It's the
front.
1973 antlers that were on the John Deere.
Yeah, so you'll learn simple questions are really complicated for me.
Huh.
I love that, and I want to see the archive, and maybe we get to after hours tour tonight. But the astounding amount of history that you, like you said, you enjoy organizing things, which is good because you've got a lot to organize.
Yeah, and so I joined Deere in 2001. The archive started in 1976. So we're 47 years old. But also the company was almost 140 years old before the archive started. So think about how much history kind of goes away during that period of time.
Wow.
So there are definitely people who came before me, and my job is to be a steward of the collection and to think about what's important today that someone, future Neil has to reference. So that's a big part of the job.
When do most companies start an archive?
Farm4Profit started one 5 years after it was created.
Yeah.
we just started putting crap up on our shelves in our studio, and it's not crap because you eventually are going to remember it's where it came from, or this is a gift that someone gave us.
Right.
We put it
Like
up.
I've kept all of my hats since the session that I've made for our company, but that's the most that I've done.
So how big is the archive for the collection? How many square foot?
It's all said and told somewhere around 60,000 square feet. Okay. So that includes a couple areas. One is the main kind of business collection. So mostly we're a business archive, meaning correspondence, service literature, advertising, board minutes. Think about those types of
I didn't even know this was a
business
job.
records.
I just thought like people did it, like that worked there, like were forced to.
Forced.
Yeah. We spend a lot of time just reviewing. So we have a process called appraisal, which is what do you keep, what do you throw away? And that's a big part of the job because someone has to make that decision. So that's a big part of it. We've got 3 million photos in the collection going back to the 1850s, probably 10,000 films going back to the 1920s.
So when you throw them away, are you literally throwing them in the trash?
If we don't keep it, yes.
Can there be like a bin that goes to Farm4Profit? No, I'm joking, but my wife would probably be really great and really bad at that job because she's really quick to just throw it away.
Yeah, and it's a combination of all the above. The way I often say it today is there's a lot less that's important. There's just a lot more of it because everything's so much volume because there's 40,000 versions of every document and every record.
Oh, man.
And so it's just fewer and fewer. And our job is to kind of just document at a high level what's going on in the company. We can't track every decision ever made. And records change. For Charles Deere, our second CEO from, well, depending on when you want him to become CEO, but say 1886 when John Deere died, and Charles Deere was president until 1907, we've got probably 30 boxes of his handwritten correspondence.
Wow.
And Bill Hewitt, who was CEO from 55 to 82, about 100 boxes of records. Then you start getting more recent, and there's fewer and fewer records, and then they become digital, and they're really hard to access, and they're really fragile, and they're really difficult to manage because you have multiple copies all over. So it gets really expensive, so you're really careful about what you keep.
How do you standardize that process? How do you like go, yep, throwing this away, nope, keeping that?
It becomes very subjective. It's about scope, and you just are constantly rescoping, and also the company changes around you.
Mm-hmm.
So something that was our core responsibility 15 years ago, now individual departments do all that on their own. So we don't even think about it. We don't manage those records. And what's really changed in the course of my career was we had these pipelines. Now we have to go out and find something. So I have to look at something and go, okay, well, I feel like precision agriculture is kind of important. Let's find everything we can on this subject and let's talk to people. Let's collect GPS receivers and data cards.
So you're the one that's taking everybody's receivers.
Yeah, for the most part. I'm really good at walking by people's desks and going, mine. Tag it.
Do you pull like the first of every tractor built from a model, or like how do you know what to do there?
We don't, and we don't collect a lot of iron anymore. When we built the last moldboard plow a year ago, we did grab that for the archives. So we have that. We've got the first 8RX tractor in our collection. It's actually up at the John Deere Tractor and Engine Museum in Waterloo. But it's getting big. Electronics are... I think about the world in terms of preservation. So there's a cost to everything. So what is it going to cost over the next 100 years to preserve hydraulics and electronics and rubber and all of those things? There's going to be a cost for someone down the road. There's a storage cost. I need a bigger dock and now, bigger overhead doors to get this stuff in. And at the end of the day, we don't want to have the biggest collection of things nobody sees. We'd much rather have something out in the world. So we think about that. We don't go to auctions and outbid people on antique tractors. Because if I'm going to put it in a warehouse, there's no point. I'd much rather have it taken from show to show and have people enjoy it versus sitting in our warehouse in case one day we want to show it to people.
I've always been curious about how many of the tractors and how do you decide, and if you go and buy them from auctions. That was always something I wondered because, everybody loves the 4440 and the 4020 and just can't believe you wouldn't have a collection of as many of those as you could get your hands on.
So we have purchased at auction before just a couple times, but a lot of what we have in our collection came directly out of a factory. So we have a lot of new equipment.
isn't some of your stuff not even owned by you? It's like lent to you.
We have a few pieces loaned to us, and so like at the Tractor and Engine Museum, we always have some pieces owned by collectors there just because we like to tell that story. Machines take on a life of their own, right? When they leave the facility and they go out into the world for 75 years, and those are the incredible stories. So we try to capture those. A lot of what we have, when we opened headquarters in 1964, we built a display floor and we needed equipment to showcase. We did the same in 1987 for the company's 150th anniversary. So you kind of go to the factories and say, what did you keep? What's still here? And then you kind of centralize the management of those through the archives. And then on occasion, we'll go out, we'll find a piece. For example, we own the first DI tractor from 1935, our first industrial tractor. And we bought that at auction probably 12 or 15 years ago. We've been kind of following it for a long time. And that's actually, I think, the only piece that we've bought at auction in my career, just because it was one and it was significant.
So when you took that RX off the assembly line, did you have to buy that?
We did have to buy it. So we go through a series of approvals, and typically someone will reach out to me and say, hey, Neil, this is happening. You need this. And that's kind of how the process goes. And then I go beg, borrow, and steal and say whatever you need. And the 8RX was funny because my initial response was, well, I don't have anywhere to put it. It's too big. So we put it in the Tractor and Engine Museum because that was the only spot we had for it. It didn't really fit the scope of the museum yet. Well, then we had to go through the process of the new machine we always had in the museum was something you could climb into the cab. And I said, well, no one can get into this because it's coming into the archives. So we had this debate about people's experiences. So we actually took the interior out, put in a new interior, and then when we move it to the archives, we'll put the original interior back in.
Because those details matter.
Right, they matter.
I just would have left the plastic on the seat.
Yeah, with kids, it would have lasted about 3 minutes.
A lot of people do leave it on the seat.
Yeah.
So, does your wife think you're a hourder?
No, but
I don't think hoarders
she's-
get paid to keep things.
yeah,
They might not, but I'm just curious. Like, what does it go into your home life too?
it doesn't at all, actually.
Oh, so you're not a collector.
No, I don't collect anything.
That's what I was curious. Like, what's your special at home?
I have one collection. I have an autograph from every member of the 2016 Cubs World Series team. And it's very focused. There's 25 guys on the roster, and then the collection's closed and it ends. So it's not perpetual collecting around it.
Right.
So I went into it with a strategy. So this is what I'm after. I set up, I found a couple auction sites, set up my bids every day. It was daily auctions. I'm also incredibly cheap. So I knew the prices would go down eventually when guys got traded and whatever. So I was very kind of laser focused. But it's actually against the archival code of ethics for me to collect anything related to John Deere. Anything that I get related to John Deere, I have to offer to the collection.
Really?
So if I find something great, I have to give it to the collection.
So that's like,
Could you sell it to the collection?
I mean, I guess I probably could, but I couldn't approve it, and I wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
I think so. Years ago, I found we've got a full collection of U.S. patent gazettes from 1790 to 2002, which I'm told is one of like 5 existing collections in the world in print. 2002 is when they last printed them, and we were missing one volume, and I found it, I think, on eBay. And bought it for like $30 because I'm the only person on the planet who was looking for it and donated it to the
You're the
collection.
guy bidding me up on eBay.
Yeah. We've bought, let's see, on eBay we bought that. I bought a snowmobile helmet about 10 years ago.
oh,
And that may be the only thing. I was bidding.
They're coming back, you know.
Yeah.
I've been buying some old John Deere snowmobile brochures and things.
Yeah.
Pristine.
Yeah.
I mean, worth framing in
Yeah.
the studio. I got an old liquefier sitting in the shed.
I want to go back to the code of ethics. I mean, it makes sense because why would you jeopardize the collection that you're trying to maintain and grow with your own items? But I'm not in your role, but I'd find it hard to, we're going to throw this away. But no, I'm not throwing it away. I'll go put this in my garage, or I'll go put this in my somewhere else. So that's fascinating that he just can close it off.
Yeah, it's a weird thing because people will say, well, I really want to work in the archives. I love history. And I say, well, that's great, but it's not a prerequisite for the job. Like, that's nice that you have a passion for history, but that's not what the job is. It's nice to kind of round things out.
So do you have a grading system? Like we've sold a bunch of baseball cards, and they have this one's graded to this one's graded to that. Is there anything to archiving that has a grading system so you can see like deterioration over time?
Not really. When we digitize, we often digitize for preservation because of overuse of materials are handled all the time. Researchers are in, you go to something, and that way we can kind of control that. Our goal is to always have multiple copies of every piece of advertising. It used to be in the olden days, you'd put it on a copy machine. Well, every time you photocopy it, you take years of its life off because of the light exposure.
Oh, really?
So
Okay.
then we would have one that you'd have to maybe cut the spine on to put it on the copy machine, and you'd always use the same one over and over, and the other one you kept pristine. Staples intact, never copied, all those things, so you always had that. And so there's kind of there's a method to the madness of how we go about that. We spend a lot of time documenting the transition of records, so if a title changes on a publication, because what happens is if you say, well, I'm looking for a piece of construction equipment from 1942, my job is to know, well, we didn't have a construction division. What was that machine form called, to kind of translate it historically so we
Right.
can look for it, because you're not going to know what you're looking for. We have a digital archive. You build things. Well, I can tell you the number one search term, John Deere. Well, it's everything.
Yeah.
So you're going to get 4 million hits and say, I quit.
Yeah.
So our job is to kind of figure those things out and trace the evolution of records. So our job is to know what information is inside of records, not to know the records.
Right.
If that makes any
That
sense
makes
at
sense.
all.
So you keep saying we. How many people are on your team?
We've got, so in terms of archivist, I'm the only archivist right now, but we've got a curator on staff who manages our art collection, our artifact collection, which is probably 2,500 artifacts. So like a snowmobile helmet, we'd call an artifact.
Yeah.
Or a trophy would be an artifact to us. And then also the equipment collection.
Okay.
And then we've got a lot of people, obviously at Deere, who know a lot of things. So we're calling people constantly asking for help. I spend very little time thinking about equipment. I feel like it's a dark, dirty secret that apparently is out now. But my job is to know the organization, and we're trying to document people. I mostly look for records with informational value. So like to your question about condition, what I want to know is what's inside the record. I don't care what condition it's in. I mean, that's part of the preservation of something and what it's going to cost to manage it. And do we have to duplicate it or digitize it or whatever? But I want the information that's inside that tells us something. It gives us evidence of something that's happening. That's what's most important to us.
So team is not very big.
It's not very
It's
big.
not big, and it ebbs and flows over time.
How do you-
We've got suppliers that help us. You know, we've got partners all over the place. We have an archive in Germany that handles most of the Lance history and kind of the co-branding of John Deere Lance through the 50s and 60s. Every John Deere facility around the world has kind of a historian who kind of collects things. There's a closet everywhere, and we kind of tap into the closet
Yeah.
and kind of just have this network of people all over the place, because you don't need me documenting the history of John Deere in Grimsby or in Monterey. We want people who know that history locally. So we all kind of work together that way.
When did John Deere partner with Erdl?
When
On
did
all
John
the-
Deere start? Well, we started, I guess, in 1947 was the first John Deere Erdl. And we've actually got one of those down at the John Deere Pavilion now. We just opened an exhibit on the history of John Deere toys.
On toys.
Yeah. Yeah. So our oldest toy in the exhibit is a goat wagon from 1912, designed to be pulled by a goat or a dog. And then it kind of goes through history of ride-on tractors and the first Erdl tractor. We've got the first Vindex toy tractor based on a Model D from 1929
Wow.
down there. So a lot of really cool stuff.
Do you have a favorite story or piece that you've collected that maybe not a lot of people know about?
Favorite story or piece? Probably my favorite piece, because it makes no sense, is we have a 2-piece wool bathing suit owned by Mr. John Deere.
Wool bathing suit.
Yeah.
2-piece.
And it's green. And
It's green.
It's green. It was given to us by Bill Hewitt, who was the last Deere family member to be CEO. And he gave us a note that listed everyone in the family who owned it before him. And gave it to us in the late 70s. Yeah.
Wool.
We have, I think, 6 photos of John Deere, 1 letter that he wrote, a ton of canceled checks because he founded the first bank in Moline, and he wrote checks for cash all the time. So we have thousands of canceled checks, and then we have his bathing suit for some strange reason.
There's only 6 pictures, but you have a bathing suit?
Yeah.
How do you
And
feel
it's
if
wool.
you're his brother, though? It got named John Deere, not Charles Deere.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, it's not in a letter anywhere? There's no ill will between the brothers?
No. So Charles was John's son.
Oh, I
Yep.
thought, okay, sorry.
Nope, that was his son. So John and his wife, they had 10 children. Only 5 of them lived past their teenage years.
Huh.
And Charles was the only living boy. And so the family the family and company history is really interesting because then the next generation, Charles's 4 sisters, their sons all joined the business. But the sisters were clearly, based on the letters we have, pulling the strings. Because they'd say, well, Uncle Charles wants you to go to St. Louis and run the branch, but I think that's a terrible idea. I think you should actually go to Kansas City because there's more responsibility there for you. And so there's this really interesting family dynamic of everyone kind of positioning their part of the family for the next generation.
Why do you think they were kind of in the background doing that?
I just
Part of
think
the times?
I just think they grew up in the family business. They were all very well educated. John himself, his education was a 4-year apprenticeship as a blacksmith.
Okay.
But all the kids went to school.
Wow. So do people just bring you things? Do you have to sort through, hey, I found this. It says John Deere. You need it.
We've got, yes, we probably get offered 5 or 6 pieces of equipment a week from people, and it's typically like a Model A tractor, and our answer is like, we can't take them all back. Like, we're very honored, but we can't take them all.
And they're probably thinking, please take it back.
Yeah.
They probably think it's worth money.
Yeah.
Some of them. Oh, will you buy it back? It's one of the first.
Yeah. Yeah, and what we're looking for is typically different than, because we're not in the collector world. What we're looking for is very different. I'm looking for something like,
It was owned by Abe Lincoln.
yeah.
Oh, wait. That might not be the right time.
If you have a piece of paper that shows that John Deere and Abe Lincoln met, I'm really interested in that. I've been searching for that for 20 years.
Oh, you really have?
Yeah, and they've never met as far as I can tell. I thought I had them in the same spot in Chicago in the 1850s, but it turned out that John Deere was actually in St. Louis giving a deposition in a court case.
Didn't Farmer Grace's family have history with Abe Lincoln or something about
Down by the river. Crossing a
river? Yeah, down on their farm.
Yeah,
they
he
ran a ferry.
Ferried
Yeah.
them over.
Oh, yeah.
It's kind of interesting.
Yeah, so that's kind of my white whale. I'd love to have a uniform from a John Deere battalion member during World War II. We had an ordnance battalion of employees that repaired tanks and helped prepare equipment for D-Day. They were overseas for a couple of years.
Yeah, that's one of the cool things is seeing John Deere's role in the wars
Yeah.
and all that kind of stuff. So
Yeah, it's what I love about working there as a 187-year-old company. We've been a part of everything for 187 years, so there's always these kind of interesting relationships all over.
right. Wow.
So if people want to see this stuff, it is open to the public?
The archives is available for someone who wants to do research.
Okay.
Basically, it's you contact us and we kind of go through a process of what you're looking for. It's not something you just walk through, primarily because everything's in a box.
What would somebody
in
want to do
storage.
research on John Deere for? Like, other than writing a book or something like that? I mean, who's your average person that comes in? Hey, I'd like to look at your archives.
It's pretty rare. 15 years ago, there was someone sitting in the archives every day doing research because they were writing an article or a dissertation. I mean, you name it, someone's doing research on something, trying to track something down. Now, the questions are, I'm looking for this obscure piece of information. will you scan everything you have and send it to me in the next 15 minutes?
Oh, jeez.
So it's really easy to say we're probably going to take a hard pass on that.
Yeah.
I want to know what size bolt was used on that hood side.
That
What
actually
size
is a
screw?
question.
Is it?
Yes, that is a question. Yeah.
Do you have the thread pattern on what this? Yeah.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
I want to
Yeah.
know how many of these watches were made, because they're cheap, but there's a lot of them. These guys.
That's licensed product. It's out of scope for us. We don't collect
Really?
those.
You don't collect those?
No.
I started collecting just because they're cheap.
Yeah.
And that was supposedly a years of service.
Oh, yeah. That's a retirement watch. I
Watch.
can tell because it's got John Deere. So all the retirement pins and rings and things would always have John Deere's portrait on it.
Yep.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of cool. I can't afford tractors or have the space for tractors to collect, so it just was like getting some stuff for the studio. I like watches.
Well, we've got an offering for you. We have the first ever 9RX
Made by a CTO.
by the probably one and only CTO of John Deere.
One of
Yeah.
one. One of one.
One of one. And I mean, you can start off by naming your price. We'll just give you that opportunity.
Well, I'd have to do a little research into the medium to see, because I imagine it can't be around heat sources. I got to think about that.
Oh, it has been baked. No, we would never
Okay.
give that away. That's priceless. That was a real fun conversation as well.
I did an early research project in my career. The actor Matthew Modine is a huge watch collector, and he bought a John Deere watch at an auction and contacted us, and there was an inscription on the back, and he wanted to know the history of it. And I initially looked at it and said, well, that's an insane question. We'd never figure this out. And we actually found a newspaper article and a photo of the event. It was an employee from I forget, it was like 1935 or something. And we were actually able to track that watch. And it was such a fluky, I just remember everyone going, what? We figured this out?
We did?
What? This is a thing?
That's cool.
And so we just so sometimes we get lucky on things like that.
Well, one of my promises in the CTO campaign that I didn't make because I quit my promises when I found out I wasn't going to get it was I wanted to make a special, high-end John Deere watch. Like Breitling, Rolex, and all these other watches make watches specific to a Mustang or a Porsche or whatever.
Yeah.
And I'm like, John Deere tractor's worth way more than a Lamborghini or whatever, all this stuff. Like, we should have a watch that comes with it.
Yeah, and the
So-
tractor's going to retain its value longer.
Yeah, so, we need to get that done.
Yeah, I
That'd be
think
kinda
that's
cool.
that's still a pretty good idea.
Yeah.
You should push that through.
What's the coolest partnership in history of John Deere that people wouldn't know about?
Coolest partnership? Wow, that's a tough question.
I'm guessing they've, so we're here at the John Deere Classic. So they've partnered on a golf
With
tournament
PGA.
for
Yep.
PGA
Yeah.
there's got to be something like they worked with McDonald's. They worked with
Well, they had
the
a
military.
partnership with wool swimsuits.
And I always picture John Deere sitting in the hot tub in his two-piece
Really?
wool
Do
bathing
you?
suit. Kind of. Well, he used to go to the hot springs in Arkansas
Yeah.
and sit in the hot springs, aka the hot tub.
Yeah.
So that's my John
And
Deere.
it's green.
That's who he's become to me. Yeah, it's
That's
green.
my John Deere.
Yeah, I think a lot of people point to NASCAR in the late '90s, I think '96 through 2000 partnership. Boy, what else? Partnerships. I can't think of anything off the top of my
Snowmobiles?
head.
Didn't they have a
Snow-
Kawasaki motor in 'em or
yeah,
something?
yeah.
Four wheelers.
Yeah, that was Bombardier, I think.
Bombardier,
Yeah, the John Deere Buck,
Yep.
Yep.
the short-lived Buck.
Yeah.
There's a pristine one at our ethanol plant that
Yeah.
a guy bought and is using, and I love watching it go around.
Yeah, I think I kind of want one for the collection, but I don't
Yeah.
know.
You slide your leg all the way across.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah. Yeah, I think in like the late 19th and early 20th century, we had partnerships all over the place because sales branches could partner with local manufacturers. So the sales catalogs from that era are great.
Yep.
And it's just so many random products. And those catalogs are like 300-400 pages of just product, and some John Deere, some not. I think the Veely automobile is really interesting from the early 20th century.
What is that? I don't know anything about that.
I don't know that.
So Stephen Veely married Ellen, either Emma or Ellen Deere, one of John Deere's daughters, and his son, so John Deere's grandson, was on the board of directors at John Deere, and he had a carriage company which became an automobile manufacturer in Moline, And at one time, he was like a top 10 automobile manufacturer in Moline. And then eventually they went into the airplane business. And he built what was called the Veely Monocoop, which is the only airplane Charles Lindbergh ever owned, was a Veely. So he was a pretty big deal. Everyone was building cars. The Quad Cities had a dozen car manufacturers in the 19-teens. Charles Deere went into the car business for 2 years.
Really?
But passed away. So if you ever see Deere Clark, that's the Deere Clark automobile, which was very short-lived.
Wow.
So if you go to eBay, you can on occasion find something that's super overpriced. And so
Is there any cars left from that?
I believe there's one.
Really?
Yeah. So these things are kind of out there. The Veelys, they were in the saddle business for a long time out of Kansas City.
Cool.
Because several Veelys ran Deere sales branches.
Right.
And yeah, you can really kind of go deep into the family and these different
Yeah, I'm totally
different
not
businesses.
in this interview anymore because I'm reading about the Veely automobile.
Yeah.
I'm gonna save that and I'll keep
Do you
reading
think
into that.
we've lost collectability in just the normal? We've made things plastic and stuff just isn't made like it used to be. Do you think we've lost it?
I think we've lost some of that. Yeah. And I mean, that comes into account in archives is you got to think, well, what is it going to take us to preserve this forever? And in most cases, we're a climate controlled facility. So I always use the example of like films. If I take a 16 millimeter film and if I put it in a freezer, it'll be there 300 years later and I could play it. VHS had a 20-year life expectancy. And digital, it depends because software moves so fast that the file may be good, but you don't have software to read it anymore. And we've had examples where we've got photography that we can't open the photos anymore because the software was proprietary and it's 20 years old and no one's figured out how to extract the data.
It's almost like you got to upload it like every year.
Yeah.
To a new
Yeah.
thing.
If you're looking to boost your harvest efficiency this season, look no further than Brandt. All of their grain cart options are designed with you in mind, from unmatched durability to innovative features that make unloading easier and faster. Not to mention their unique large footprint track configuration that reduces field compaction and increases flotation throughout your field. They're the hardest working, most efficient units in the industry. Brandt grain carts are here to be built to keep you running smoothly. Visit Brandt.ca today to learn more information and see why farmers across North America trust Brandt. That's Brandt.ca for more information. Strong, reliable, built to last.
Yeah. So I have that conversation all the time. Piece of paper on the shelf costs nothing and I can get to it in 1,000 years. That zip drive or floppy disk or the JPEG you just sent me, I've got to copy it and migrate it every year. That takes time and money.
Yep.
And so do I really need 4,000 photos of that tractor? Probably not. I probably need 5. Our goal was always to have 5 photos of every machine. So we wanted each side, front, rear, and an overhead, and that was it.
Yep.
Because you don't want to look through 800 million photos in 20 years.
But is it every machine with a loader and then without a loader and then with ROPS and then with a cab and then
Like different variations.
Tractordata.com. It's got to have them from somewhere.
I don't know the answer yet. The most recent photos in the archives collection are from 2005.
Oh.
So they've not come to us yet. So when someone says what happened in 2010, I'll say, I don't know. That's not here yet for me.
So like
It's
80,
not old enough
I'm
yet.
working in the,
like 8420, 8520 is like
Yeah.
the last collectible tractor now. That's what we're talking about. 9520s, yeah. The 20 series.
Corey's got one of those he'll sell you.
I love it. I love the 20 series.
Yeah.
Huh. Do you guys have your own social media channel aside from Deere?
No, we don't.
Have you seen McDonald's?
Yeah.
Do you watch that?
Yeah.
Their stuff's kind of interesting.
Yeah, and I know Mike in the McDonald's archives. They
Oh, so
do
you
a
know
lot of
that.
cool stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm part of an organization, and of course we've got a business archives organization, and so we're benchmarking and talking all the time. And Carhartt's got a super cool Instagram page where Dave there is doing videos all the time, and he puts his white cotton gloves on and does the whole thing in the archives.
Yeah.
And so yeah.
Do you
we're always
really
trying to
wear
outdo
those
each other.
gloves?
Yeah. Yeah, and it depends on what we're handling. Sometimes it's the white cotton gloves. Sometimes it's like the blue gloves that your doctor wears.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And it depends on what you're handling. I tend to wash my hands all the time. And the boxes and folders that we use have what's called a calcium carbonate buffer, so it neutralizes the acids in my fingers, so it doesn't migrate to documents. And you build microclimates. We've got cabinets that are fireproof. We've got some that are waterproof. So you're always kind of building different environments for different types of collections.
What did you think of the show National Treasure?
A little jealousy. I thought it was pretty cool.
I thought it was way cool, and they just come up with something, and then it goes to something
Nicolas
else. And then it goes
Cage?
and then it goes to something else. And then it goes. He's
Nick
like,
Cage
hey,
is
look at the back of
hated
a $100 bill, like right here. It's like, what? No way.
Yeah, I'm such a nerd for stuff like that because, people assume that I hate it. And I'm like, no, it's so cool. Like anything, I'm always flipping documents over, looking at it and trying to figure out something that somebody else missed. So it's part of the fun.
Yeah, I could see that.
I remember finding, the reason I wrote the biography of John Deere was I found a letter in the Charles Deere papers that Charles Deere was being blackmailed by somebody. In probably like the late 1880s. And so someone wrote him a letter and said that they had dirt on the family and they needed to send money. And just nothing ever happened. Like there's no other correspondence. So you just have one letter of someone trying to blackmail them.
They shut down their email. It doesn't
Yeah,
work
you're just
anymore.
looking at it like,
It's probably just a picture of him in that wool swimsuit.
yeah, probably.
Now it's every day some prince is trying to get
Money
money
from him.
from
Yeah. Yeah. So you find those things, and you're like, oh, there's skeletons here. And I haven't actually found any skeletons, but you're always looking for something cool.
I mean, there's probably always a little bit of skeleton somewhere.
And it's the crazy thing about records is I've done a lot of research into this all-wheel drive tractor from 1918 and 19, and I have people tell me, no, there was 100 built. And I say, well, like, show me the record. Like, you're dealing with something some dude told you. And I'm actually reading the records here that said we built 90 of them. So I have that back and forth all the time. But you just kind of get, like, sucked in. But I was trying to kind of back my way into how many were built. You always go to accounting records. And you're trying to figure out depreciation on machines and figure out maybe how many were sold or built. And they're records I'd read hundreds and hundreds of times. But I was never looking for that thing I was looking for at that moment. It had been there the whole time. But I'd never actually been looking for it, so I never saw it. So you just tend to go back to these same things over and over again, but you just find different things.
I bet you have old guys come into the museum and be like, well, I used to work here, and by God, I know they made, And you're like, well.
We say, what's your name? What's your department? When did you work there? Tell us more. Try to figure that out.
Huh.
I always wondered, like, obviously they're making like the 4020s and the 4440s and all that, like those really collectible tractors that everyone loved. Is there a bunch of parts sitting somewhere, that were put on the shelf? Like, could we make 4020 again?
I mean, if I knew, I wouldn't tell you, first of all. Maybe.
Fair answer.
I mean, I imagine there's some of this stuff just tucked away.
Because you got to still have parts for them, right? Like, you still have to service them to an extent. They're still a used tractor.
And I always wondered when they were being built, were the people building them, did they know how big of a deal it was at the time?
Good thought.
But that's a good point. Yeah. Did they know that they were going to make 300? Just a number. Make 300. So did they make 300 front axles and 300 oil pans and 300, or was it we just stamped out oil pans until we switched the line over?
Yeah.
So now there's parts.
But if you made 300, then you had to make X amount of extra parts and everything like that just to service the
Forever
dang
and
things
ever.
for a long time. Or keep the molds and all that kind of stuff around to fire it back up when you need it.
That was one of your promises in your CTO campaign.
Yeah, bring back the 4020. I do think, maybe not the 4020, but I think there would be a no frills, less technology, just horsepower that works and is reliable. I think there's a market for something like that.
Yeah. I think you would still have enough use out of a 4440, the 40 series technology. And that horsepower is, on the small end of what gets utilized on operations these days.
Maybe, if there's a couple weaknesses or something like that, fix it there, and just a blend of new and old. Be kind of cool. Yep.
I'm thinking a fleet of, did you ever see the Chip Foose 4020?
Yes.
Yeah, I think a fleet of those would be pretty sweet.
Badass.
There was a TikTok video the other day that Case isn't going to do a CTO, but they were doing something with that. No, it's a poor, horrible story. I got to go back and look at it. But
I'm agreeing with you, though.
Cut this out.
There was something that they were going to make a CTOS deal for, Yeah. Chip Foo's tractor.
Nobody wants that.
Yeah.
Nobody wants anything case,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, we're,
They're
good
pretty
thing we cut-
diehard too.
cut a
I
lot
tell
of-
you what.
yeah. So it is really interesting when you go back to how we introduced you as an author and where that's taken you outside of the experience that you have. Now, what was the connection to Iowa Public Television?
Yeah, that just kind of came about. They just sent me an email and said, "We got the book, and we'd love to work on something with you." So we spent about a year, and they worked based on the book, started to do their own research and kind of adding to it, and it's been a really interesting process. The documentary came out in February, and I think we may be over 2 million views now of the documentary.
Wow.
And but we had the same pains because I had one day where I cut 100 pages out of the book. And so you kind of do all your writing and research over time, and then you get editors and you're going back and forth, and every chapter in the book was the first chapter at some point during the course of the book because you're trying to build this narrative. And they went through the same thing. They said their first cut of the documentary was 2 hours and they had to get down to like 54 minutes.
Holy smokes.
So then you're just like, I think of all the things that were left out. But also I didn't want to write a 700-page book that nobody was ever going to read. And I also never thought more than 3 people would read the book, because when you get into it and say, well, I'm going to do this, who's going to be interested in this? And so I'm fortunate I have a day job. So I do research on topics that interest me. Tractor Wars was about my 75th start at a book in the last 15 years. And so you just do things, and either you run out of content, because people don't think about that. You have to have documentation to write about something. So someone would say, well, you needed more on Hart Parr or Alice. And I'm like, well, right, but there's like 5 pages of documentation of the history of the entire company.
Right.
So I can't turn that into 75 pages in this book.
Right.
And the kicker for me was John Deere was not going to be in the book originally. Because when I decided it was going to be on kind of the origins of the tractor industry in this period that Cyrus McCormick III called the Tractor Wars, which is where that came from, it was going to be International Harvester and Ford. And I wasn't sure Deere was going to fit until I got to the end and said, okay, well, obviously I know where this goes. But the book ends essentially in 1928 when Ford pulls out, which I've been just people on my case about. They're like, well, he didn't entirely withdraw. I'm like, right, I know 1929 happened and 1930 happened. I'm aware, but the book ends.
Right.
And so then I just really got invested in how differently those 3 companies went about it. And then I just decided, well, market share was what I was looking at, market share over time. And so then you can't leave Deere out, because when Ford leaves, then it's Harvester and it's Deere, who have like 85% market share collectively. So that was kind of the story I was looking to tell. And I wasn't looking to write a coffee table book with 4,000 photos of tractors. I wanted to do something that hadn't been done before, so it's just harder because you're kind of making it up as you go and doing a lot of redlining and messing up. And then you're done. You're like, oh, okay, I guess I'm done.
How does John Deere handle that? You can't collect John Deere things, but then obviously you writing a book probably takes a lot of your time away from work, and you have to get paid for that, right? You're able to monetize that?
So the book is a separate project done on my own time. I go and talk to all the right people. I report everything I'm doing. And so I just you just keep everything on the level. And so like with PBS, like I don't make anything from that. I don't get paid for anything. We had an event at the Tractor and Engine Museum a few weeks ago, so I take a day of vacation to do that. Yeah.
You took a day of vacation to be at work?
I took a day of vacation to have an event at a museum that I oversee for a book that I wrote for PBS. If any of that makes sense, yes. Just because I want to be very, very clear.
Well, that's great, yes.
And so, like, proceeds from the book, like, I'll put a certain percentage for, like, a charitable contribution. And just because I have access, and I don't want to overly take advantage of that. And so, also, what's been great from a Deere perspective is no one from Deere ever sees anything that I do for the book. because I'm very clear up front, and I say, whatever the story is the story I'm telling. And so if someone makes a mistake, they made a mistake. It's not Neil, the archivist at Deere, just skipping it and leaving it out. And there's not, like I said, there's not a lot of skeletons from any of these companies, but there's personalities involved. And so when Willard Veely says to the board, you're too slow building a tractor, I'm just going to design one myself and build my own factory. And he designed one himself, actually took a competitive tractor to a tractor demonstration in 1917 because Deere didn't have one yet, bought land in East Moline to build a tractor factory because Deere wasn't doing it fast enough. And then he got a truck order during World War I, so he canceled tractor plans. It's like, I could have left all that out, but like that's the really interesting stuff.
That could
these
have
are all
killed
things
John
going on.
Deere if
Yeah.
he decided to not do that.
Yeah. So imagine sitting in the boardroom, and it's basically cousins. We have documentation like reports, but like imagine that conversation. And that's what I think about a lot, of kind of all the maneuvering and things going on and what it really takes to move things forward.
Wow. That's a lot to think about. One little thing could have
Changed
It's
history.
always that way.
snuffed it all out.
Everything aligns. The stars all align in order to get the
Yeah.
history that we've got.
I always think about William Butterworth, our third CEO, opening up the Moline Dispatch and reading the International Harvester bought the factory in Rock Island that used to be the largest tractor factory in the world from the Moline Plow Company. Deere was looking into buying it but couldn't afford it. And IH bought it and moved Farmall production right down the street, less than a mile from where Butterworth was sitting at headquarters. So I just always picture him picking up the newspaper and reading that headline on the front page going,
And then throwing whatever breakable thing on his desk was at
Yeah.
the wall.
And how long was that in business?
I think that opened in 1926, and they were there till late 70s.
Well, then it became Rock Island Armory, or
No, it became, I think was like a milk processing plant afterwards or something.
so why is this not called Tractor Town? That's what it should be.
Well, for a long time, this area was called the farm implement capital of the world.
Okay.
Deere was here, and my grandparents met at Minneapolis Moline, which was based in Moline, formerly the Moline Plow Company, International Harvester. I think Cat had a place in Bettendorf for a while. So this stuff was
I think we should call it Tractor Town.
yeah, it was a lot here. I like Tractor Town USA.
Tractor Alley.
Sounds like it's like a good hat or
Yeah.
a good shirt.
I think so.
Put it on the Farm4Profit store.
We should. Put a dot on the map.
There you go. Love that.
So you're out here at the John Deere Classic, and we had to wait until, I say it like that, we had to wait until you were done with your shift.
Yeah.
How long have you volunteered for the Classic?
I volunteered out here probably 15 years or so.
Really?
Yeah, just kind of lots of. So Claire Peterson, who was the director here before Andrew, was my boss for a while early in my career, and I was just telling this story because probably 5 or 6 years ago, Claire called me and he said, "Hey, we're doing a profile on employee volunteers, and we want to do a profile on you." And I said, "Well, Claire, I've been out there every year, but I've never actually volunteered. I just do things that you ask me to do. So you should find someone else who's an actual volunteer." So since then, I actually volunteer. So I've been working in the fan zone. My wife's been a standard bearer for, I think, 16 or 17 years.
A standard bearer?
Yeah, so she carries the sign with the scores with the golfers. So she's been doing that, and my son, who's 14, was the official kid reporter of the John Deere Classic, I think 3 years ago. So they've been great. They've given him media credentials ever since. So he goes around and he does his thing on his YouTube channel, and he sits in the media center and covers the interviews and does all that. So the Dahlstrom family's out here every day. They left the house at, I think, 5:30 this morning. I was a little later than that, but we'll be out here every day volunteering. And then my wife and I volunteer. We're cleaning up after the concerts for the Moline Booster Club, so we're volunteering with other organizations to help the John Deere Classic when we're not volunteering with the John Deere Classic.
Wow.
So we always try to be out here and
Those
helpful.
people that carry the signs and have that little like sash with a
Yeah,
little-
that's her.
it looks like you just kind of be off kilter all day long, and your back would hurt like sitting on a wallet all
Yeah.
day.
Yeah, and they're very detail oriented if you actually watch them, because so whoever's actually hitting, they have to put their fingers up next to their name, so you know.
Oh.
So if you watch them, you know who's getting ready to hit, and they can't be in sight line, so they're always kind of jockeying around trying to find position, and so
He's doing it
it's
right.
very very precise.
He's doing it right now. Whoever's
Yeah.
on the bottom of the card just hit.
Yep.
Is it their job to know, like, whether they got a birdie or a par on that hole, or someone talking to them?
So there's a scorekeeper who walks with them,
Okay.
and then they'll change the cards. So
There
between
you
the
go,
two of them,
Dave. That was your official guy. The guy that's with them
Yep.
is overseeing the card.
This is cool.
yeah. So it's like anything. If you actually you really pay attention on things and you know what you're looking for.
Yeah.
Everyone's got very specific roles, and they're all very good at it.
So what's new? What are you chasing now? Anything crazy?
Besides military uniform,
I was going to say, I can put a APB to the auctioneer world, and everybody, I know the guy that's looking for this.
Yeah, I've had a couple people reach out to me. They say, I've got like grandpa's uniform, and I'll get in touch with you someday, sort of thing. So we have a few leads, and it's not, you don't press, like, you have to be just really respectful, and you don't want to just go in and going, well, I really want this stuff.
Right.
So
You also
I
don't
just-
want to
like
let
you
it
said,
die.
Right.
You have to. There's a cost for you to keep it. So if someone else
Yeah.
can keep it, as long as they keep it well,
But they're not doing it as good as he could.
Right.
that's true.
Right.
Do you have pictures of what it looks like?
Yeah, we've got, cause we have scrapbooks from battalion members, telegrams. Deere actually held a reunion of the John Deere battalion every 5 years until the year 2000.
The only reason I ask is, are you getting AI involved in your stuff to where it's automatically searching if anybody posts something on the internet about it to, notify you and tell you that, hey, somebody posted this? And
We're not working on that yet. We're working on AI on top of our own collection, so it can identify a machine form or use facial recognition or something like that.
yeah.
So that's what we're kind of turning it on right now. We'll see. And we're looking at AI like everybody else, and so people are always amazed when I go, yeah, the archives, we're really pushing forward with AI, and they're like, what? That doesn't make sense. Like, yeah, if you think about it, it does. Our technology is in our fancy mobile shelving, where you can push a button and all the shelves move, and it's got motion activated lighting and all these sorts. That's why we say, yeah, our money's in shelves and boxes.
Well, yeah, if you got the special boxes that offset your skin oils and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm always looking for a lot of kind of early precision farming documentation, but we tend to look for things like, does somebody have a study of a collab with Stanford University or something? Like, we know there's a report out here. I know that in, I think, 1942, Deere built experimental tank tractors, the Armored A, if you've ever heard of this. So it's an A tractor with armor on it. Well, apparently there were tests done at Aberdeen Proving Grounds, and there was film taken of the machine in action, which I've never seen. So there's a couple things like that I'm kind of just hoping will pop up someday. And I don't know if that film still exists or not. It's probably in Area 51 or something.
Area 51. Yeah, where do the aliens come into the archives of John Deere? Since those are real now.
So when you
as
guys
of
go
last
to
year.
a association conference for archivists,
Yeah.
if I'm saying that right, like, everybody always gives me crap. They're like, there's a conference just for auctioneers? Yeah, sure there is.
Yeah.
What do they talk about at an archivist conference?
Probably current events.
Yeah, the next one's in Chicago in early August.
Yeah.
It was DC last year. So what you'll have is it's university archivists, it's religious archivists, it's corporate archivists, it's all these different people. So it'll be sessions on how to use AI, how to manage your, what
What's
are the
working
new
in
content
archivists?
management systems.
What's working in archivists?
Yeah, digital preservation, organizational alignment, like all these things.
How much did U.S. Sugar pay to get their original engine back? We got to tour U.S. Sugar, and
the train.
they had a train that they
I
brought.
don't know that they paid a lot to get it back. They paid a bunch to restore it.
They restored
to
the
make
whole
it
thing.
usable.
Yeah.
That's a cool trip if you ever get a chance to do that. That's fun.
Boy, I just feel like we could keep going and going. I want to go see it all. I haven't been to see it.
We're going to have to make that happen. I'm 23 years in, and I'm just scratching the surface.
Man, we're going to need more time.
Are you like grooming constantly grooming
Good
someone
question.
to be next in line?
Not really constantly grooming. I think there's a lot of people out here who'd be really good at the job.
Yeah.
And I think they're just going to kind of be there, waiting and ready to go. I hope I have a long time to go with this.
Right.
Yeah, so we'll kind of see. And also, it's like any job, the nature of it changes so much. And I think someone 10 years from now is going to have such a different role being the archivist than I've had, because I've kind of transitioned everything's paper, pretty basic computer technology to manage it, to now we just launched our first digital archive internally. And so, employees will go, oh, this is great. Like, you're going to scan everything. And I say, well, my goal is in the next decade to scan 0.5% of the collection.
Holy crap.
And so, like, that's the goal. I don't want to scan everything, because do you really want to look at 5 million pages of accounting ledgers from 1910 to 1940? I don't think so.
No.
So we're not going to scan those. So we try to be very focused on what we're digitizing. And we just kind of learn things along the way. I get sucked into topics, and you kind of go down that road, and it's hard to pull yourself out from it.
You know what we didn't talk about was in my intro, I said you're also a speaker. What you get still going around speaking? What do you talk on?
Yeah, I go around mostly this year. It's been mostly local. I'll talk about the books or just specific topics. I've been whatever I'm researching at the time. I just like talking history, and anybody who'll listen to me puts my wife to sleep. So I have to go out and find other people who are willing to listen to me. And
Hey, you got an attentive audience here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and it's amazing, just especially here in the Quad Cities. I had someone contact me last week who I've known for years, and her mother-in-law, long passed away, worked at John Deere for a year in like 1916. And she said, I have her employee badge, and she worked at some sort of machine, and she was going to try to find out from family what she did. But the fact that we have her name and her badge, and now we have something we can start to kind of pull at that thread and figure out who this person was. And so those are the things that we're looking for that we don't know we're looking for, that are just always surprising. And we're trying to just kind of bring more people to the surface of all these hundreds of thousands of people who've had a connection with Deere, customers, dealers, employees. And so you just kind of learn a little bit more, and they just kind of come out one day.
Yikes. I know we can just keep
Tanner's overwhelmed.
rolling with questions. It intrigues me. I like history. Obviously, we like John Deere. And your role is just fascinating at how much you have to preserve.
Yeah, and I'm always really honored that people think that I know everything. And typically, what I do is I find someone else who knows it.
You know where it is.
Yeah, because everyone's got an area of expertise, and you just kind of build this huge network around you. Because I'm jealous of other people the way that they're jealous of me, that they know something about something that I don't know anything about.
It's not what you know, it's who you know.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Surround yourself with the best, and
Now we know Neil.
yeah, we'll just be able to call Neil up anytime.
Yeah.
And I'm not very good at hiding.
I think you guys need to get an actual social channel. I think that'd be cool. Get like an intern in there that's actually doing like what McDonald's does. Did you know that John Deere did this, or made this pen or whatever, type of deal? So, yeah, be kind of cool.
So we ask everybody one question. That question is, if we're ready, what's the best thing you've ever eaten, and where'd you get it?
The best thing that I've ever eaten was actually during John Deere Classic Week about 10 years ago, and it was a burger called the Hole-in-One. It was in downtown Moline. So it was 2 glazed donuts.
Oh, boy.
With a half-pound burger with an egg in the middle of it. And they brought out a hot, wet towel with it. So you could wipe yourself down while you were eating. And you couldn't set it down. And it was just glorious, like unbelievable. It was like 100 degrees. I was sitting outside eating this thing, and there was like glaze dripping down my arm.
Is this still a thing?
I haven't seen it since. I think it was a one-time menu option, and it was just unbelievable.
I was going to write it down for tonight. Would have went good with Cardiac Hill.
Yes.
Yeah, Cardiac Hill and the Hole-in-One.
Yeah.
You got to climb Cardiac Hill before you can eat your whole lawn. Or the challenge is you got to eat it at the bottom and then see if you can climb down.
Yeah. Yeah, my gosh. That does sound good.
I think my answer actually is a salad. Should I say salad?
No.
No.
And
No.
done.
Yeah, that was pretty great. I mean, my mouth is watering a little bit actually
Yes.
thinking about it.
Sounds good.
Yes.
We got to find something like that to
Yeah.
go to tonight.
Yeah. No, that is exciting. So, Neil, if people want to follow you or they want to look up your books or do anything along those lines, how best do they do that?
The website's just neildahlstrom.com, but I'm on Twitter and Facebook. Not on Instagram a whole lot, but I'm pretty easy to find. Yeah, just type my name and ask me questions. I try to be as transparent as possible. I like to share what I know and learn from other people.
It's best place to buy Amazon or
Yeah, probably Amazon, Barnes & Noble for the book.
yeah.
Yeah, a lot of local bookstores still carrying it. So it's been a lot of fun. I've been really excited at the reception that people have had for the book.
We need to get some copies for the studio.
He says it's not a coffee table book. You got to read it, put it.
Display.
I know.
Maybe some copies to give away to some guests.
Ooh,
that
that'd be a
really
great
like
idea.
John Deere.
Guests like Swyla.
Oh,
Swyla
yeah, we didn't do this.
left us a 5-star review with says thank you. This review is coming from a guy who grew up in the inner city of Chicago. Ironically, living in the city most of my life has fueled my desire for more of a rural life, which led me to ag and ag podcasts. I love everything about the life and information that you gentlemen give us weekly. So that's kind of a neat one. We always tell our listeners that we thrive off of reviews and ratings, and as long as you give us 5 stars, you can write whatever you want. Probably not. Shouldn't have started it like that, but that's the route we go. This one's a nice one. My eyes have really been open. Keep up the excellent work.
Nice.
So that was great. But Neil, we thank you for not only after your long day of volunteering, sitting down with us and hanging out, but dealing with my persistence of, hey, are you going to be here? Are you going to go there? Are you going to see us? It's been a pleasure to actually get to sit down and do it.
Oh, I appreciate you having me. It broke my heart every time I said, no, I'm not going to be there, but I'll be somewhere someday.
We found it. We got it done, and now we can do a part 2 sometime. I love it. You guys got anything else?
No.
All right. Well, listeners, thanks for tuning in. Again, thanks, Neil. And we'll talk to you next time.